And one. So economic crises mess up the livelihoods of millions of people, not because they are fast and quick, but because they are slow and drawn out. The reason why all of the massive economic crises in the past have occurred is because of inaction. It happens because the ruling elite is unable to come up or come to massive economic decisions. It happens because when they bicker and fight amongst themselves, it literally makes it harder to come to a decision. It happens at the point in which they necessarily have to cater to their own voter base to become very bipartisan. Problem: economic crises necessitate some form of apolitical action because obviously the pathway towards alleviating these crises require both sides of whatever political spectrum exists in your country to actually come together and make a reasonable decision. So, Joseph's point is very clear. If you want things to happen and if you want them to happen quick, if you want to like things to happen smart, if you want things to happen like literally just happen, then we need the central bank to step in as a necessary guide. Opposition seems to not have a very good response, at least in that regard. A lot of responses towards opening opposition. One, the problem with the logic of side opposition is that it is not empathetic to socio-economic reality. Everyone hates budget cuts and spending less. Whether you are poor, middle class, or rich, you do not want to have higher taxes and less budget. However, in times of economic crises, we need to face economic sobriety at some point, and we rather have it come sooner rather than come later. Opposition is very inflationary and can lead to the eventual suffering of the average citizen. Precisely because the people who currently have power to change the economic policy are people in government whose entire job is dependent on catering to the specific interests and wants of people. Additionally, it's just quite funny to think that a random person on Twitter has the same legitimacy and has the same potency of opinion as an economist working for the central bank. Like again, it's not giving power to the elite, right? It's giving it to technocrats who have every incentive to want to do things well. Like for real, I don't think opposition is very clear in explaining the perverse wants of financial institutions. DLO, please answer that. I really want to hear a really good explanation as to why that's so necessarily bad. Two, it is actually a status quo on side op, wherein frivolous spending like doleouts and bailouts for irresponsible industries and corporations happen. This is what Wall Street does all the time when they plead the US Treasury to bail them out. There are instances where this is catastrophic, like in 2008. But what happened in 2023 with the Silicon investment crisis, they were again given a payment window and lines of credit. These 1% of corporations and individuals who make shitty decisions are the cause of the problem. The US Treasury, who leads the fiscal arm, is likely to side with them. Thirdly, Joseph explains why the status quo is harmful, which preempts a lot of opposition material, right? But what we have to understand is the proximate interest of the voting class and the average person at the polls. The front-facing arm of government is the treasury or the fiscal side who exactly want to cater and genuflect to the voter base. The central bank, who controls the monetary arm, is less proximate, which reduces a conflict of interest wherein during times of economic crisis, they need to make harder and more painful decisions like all of the stuff found in the info slide. Again, we heard little to no response from OP. Before the extension, someone rose a POI, I'll take it now.
Can you clarify how much control this fiscal policy has? Is it only like allocating a budget, or are you also telling who gives how much in this budget?
It's in the former, you can find it in the info slide. Extension: why fiscal central banking allows for less bipartisanship and will lead to governments acting a lot more efficiently. Why is this true? The first mechanism is on just incentive and capacity. What happens in status quo right now? In status quo, it is elected politicians who dictate and decide where the economy goes. Why is this bad? This is particularly bad because the direct and core incentive of a politician is to be able to amass support and garner votes in the current and subsequent election cycle. The problem with this is that current policymakers are incentivized to go all out and do radical policy shifts in order to cater to their very specific voter base. E.g., this is what happened in Trump. It's what happened here in the Philippines with Duterte. I'm fairly certain whatever your country you are in, you can name a politician who has given a radical shift along the lines of how we should not spend anything at all, or how we should spend even more to get out of economic crises. How is this problem uniquely solved under opening government? First, it stands as a pathway towards reasonable change being made. The central bank has every incentive to not make the entire economy blow up, right? They don't need to cater to the voter base, at the very least, because it is already an assumption that they'll do well. Also, I have no idea why the central bank would even want to do anything malicious. If they mess up, it's all on them, and you can put the blame exclusively on them, which is a better thing in status quo where we don't have anyone to actually blame. Second, it angles the situation towards a more productive outcome. Look at the motion slide. The extent of power for the central bank is that they define how much the size of the budget per particular thing is. So I hope the impact is clear for this MEC, right? On our side, politicians and policymakers necessarily have to follow advice and direction on what the right thing to do is. Note this is a better guarantee because the fiscal policy on the central bank is likely to be smarter because they get first say. On their side of the house, political infighting is a massive harm that they can't deal with. But secondly, we co-opt the same benefits that LO talked about, which Ops seems to think is exclusive. Again, we set the rules and we set where the line is drawn. Policymakers still decide on what to prioritize. Democracy is still bolstered. The second mechanism, really quickly, is just on flexibility. The central bank has every ability to shift the amount of budget that can be allocated. What this means is that they are fully capable of changing the budget on a relatively quick and uncontested level. Why is this so hard on op side of the house? Because on op, politicians have to lock in on decisions even when it is bad because they have to save face to save whatever voter base they are currently catering to. They have to save face because they need the votes to continue to be in power, to have their political party stay in power. Note the impacts of this is massive. Even if politicians are the best possible actors for the motion and they do want to be flexible, their incentive literally inhibits them from wanting to change it because they have to admit that they did something wrong. How then do we win? The first exclusive thing that we have given you is this idea of protecting and bolstering democracy. Because I think it's pretty clear to say that democracy is great, but democracy is quite slow at handling economic crises when it happens. Because the people who make it up have different incentives on what to do. Note that OP doesn't have a response to this because LO has a purely negative case on us. Our side is able to explain that when democracy is failing and when these economic crises happen, we need to give power to the best and most non-subjective actor to make the right decision to do the hard things. For all of those decisions, it's a clear Gov win.